Hello then, thank you for staying with us right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. My name is Esther Mwachuku, and here are the top stories. We'll start from stories outside the shores of Nigeria, where 9 have been killed in KF intense Russian air attack. In the same vein, Qatar closes airspace as UK and US tell citizens to shelter in place. While back home in Nigeria, FAN bans cash payment, malls tariff hike in Nigerian airports. In another development, Tricycle Association of Nigeria wants President Tinubu's government asked to fulfill promise or protest begins. Amotekun arrests APC Ward Chairman Skila, 31 others. Kenneth Okungwa comes hat says APC will not know what hit them by 2027. Also, President Tinubu's government closely monitoring Trump's destruction of Iranian nuclear facilities. Details now. Thank you for staying with us. The world news begins from where about 9 persons have been killed, several others injured in an overnight Russian missile and drone attack in the Kiev region. In a post via social media, Igor Klemenko said residential areas, hospitals and sports infrastructure have been severely hit. At least 6 of those killed were in a high-rise building in the capital, Kiev's Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, who recently disclosed to the press. The city's military administration also disclosed that a further 33 people have been injured. In the latest barrage, 352 Russian drones, 16 missiles targeted Ukrainian territory, mostly in the Kiev area. President Volodymyr Zelensky is traveling to London today for talks with Prime Minister Keir Starmer on UK military support for Ukraine. One Kiev resident, Valery Makuta, who is age 33, said they woke up in rubble after the building was hit by what authorities described as a missile. Another resident, Natalia Mashavka, described hearing a drone buzzing above the apartment before it exploded. Russia has intensified its air attacks against Ukrainian cities in recent weeks, sending large waves of missiles, drones and decoys designed to overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses. While in Qatar, this very recent development, there is a temporary closure in its airspace after the United States and the United Kingdom told their citizens in the country to shelter in place until further notice. The U.S. Embassy in Qatar suggested in a notice online that Americans do so out of an abundance of caution. The U.K. government, however, said it was issuing its warning in response to the U.S. alert. The warnings come after the State Department told U.S. citizens in international locations to exercise increased caution after the U.S. bombed 3 nuclear sites in Iran on Saturday. However, Iran has threatened to retaliate. There is a credible threat in the U.S.-run Coalition Air Operations Center Al-Udad in Qatar. In a statement, Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs disclosed that the closure of its airspace was to ensure the safety of residents and visitors. While in a separate statement in response to the embassy's notice, the Foreign Ministry said the warning did not necessarily reflect the existence of specific threats. Qatar is home to the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, Al Udeid Air Base. About 8,000 U.S. citizens live there. It is also home to U.S. CENTCOM's headquarters for all its air operations in the Middle East, where British military personnel also serve on rotation. The U.S. has about 40,000 troops stationed in the Middle East. Flight tracking websites show planes diverting to other airports following the closure of Qatari airspace. Hamad International Airport is one of the world's top 10 busiest airports on international traffic, with around 140,000 passengers passing through per day. Advice for British nationals in Qatar may be updated over the course of the next few days. Also, the message from the U.S. Embassy was followed by warnings from other groups in Qatar, including several universities that ask students to go home. While back home in Nigeria, days after the Donald Trump administration decimated Iran's nuclear facilities with bunker-buster bombs, the Nigerian government, which previously rebuked Israel for airdropping bombs on Iran and killing its top generals, said it was assessing the U.S. aggression on Iranian soil. President Bola Tinubu's administration last week knocked Israel for causing an escalation of hostilities, advising that the nation should have opted for diplomacy and dialogue to resolve the bad blood with Iran. The Nigerian government, which condemned Israeli aggression on Iran with alacrity, told reporters that it was assessing the obliteration of 3 nuclear enrichment plants on Iranian soil, specifically in Fordo, Natanz and Esfahan. Asked about its position on Saturday's attack on Iranian nuclear sites, the Nigerian government refrained from commending or condemning the U.S. aggression, tiptoeing around the matter to avoid incurring Washington's wrath, given Nigeria was among a list of 36 additional countries considered for a U.S. ban. Mr. Trump called the bomb strikes a spectacular military success and boasted the U.S. troops launched a full plane load of bombs on Fordo, the primarily nuclear enrichment site in Iran. The president on Thursday threw Iranians off the U.S. scent when he announced it would take him 2 weeks to decide whether or not the U.S. would join Israel in attacking Iran. Days after that announcement, Mr. Trump appeared on a broadcast announcing the military troops destroyed 3 Iranian nuclear sites on Saturday. While Mr. Trump's statement drew criticisms from Russia, Cuba and other Gulf states nations like the UK and France have hailed the attack, asserting that Iran should never be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. Iranian authorities have, however, promised the US a devastating retaliation. Now, the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria has announced a ban on cash transactions and plans to hike tariffs nationwide. The Director of Commercial and Business Development, Fan Adebola Agumbiade, disclosed this today while speaking during an event in Lagos. Fan noted that 92% of its current revenue comes from aeronautical sources, while only 8% is derived from non-aeronautical activities, a stark contrast to global standards where non-aeronautical revenue accounts for over 40% in many developed countries. According to the government agency, the move marks a critical step in modernizing its operations and also rebalancing its revenue structure. She stressed the fund would notify service providers early enough before implementing the tariff increase. On her part, Fund's Managing Director and CEO Olubunmi Kuku lamented the number of calls and inquiries from service providers on payment renewals and applications. Now, in a very also disturbing situation, the National Commercial Tricycle and Motorcycle Owners and Riders Association, Nataras, has issued a stern warning to the federal government over what it described as unfulfilled campaign promises made by the Tinubu administration. At a press conference held in Abuja today, Alhaji Usman Buba Gwoza, national president of Nataras, said the association, which boasts over 18 million registered members across Nigeria, mobilized extensively for the All Progressives Congress during the 2023 general elections. Gwoza said we were the only association of tricycle and motorcycle riders that openly endorsed Tinubu's Shetima ticket. He said the association was promised federal appointments, funding support, and the distribution of 2,000 CNG-powered tricycles to empower members, none of which has materialized nearly 2 years after the election. In October 2024, the Minister of Youth Development, Ayodele Olawande, publicly announced that the tricycles had been handed over to Nataras. However, Gwoza said till today, not even one tricycle has been given to any other members. He added that Nataras members sponsored themselves to attend stakeholder engagement meetings organized by the Presidential Initiative on CNG across 4 states, but still received no support. He called on President Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima to honor their word. Nataras is one of the largest informal transport associations in the country, and they played a critical role in grassroots mobilization during the 2023 general elections. The Ondo State Security Network Agency, also known as Amotekun, has disclosed that it arrested no fewer than 32 persons suspected to be criminals across the state. The Corps also said it had arrested one of the prime suspects who killed the ward chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Mr. Nelson Adepoyigi, who was kidnapped by some armed men at the entrance of his farm along the Ifo-Owo Road in Ifo, the headquarters of Osaloku government area of the state last month. He was abducted along with 2 other victims. Parading the suspects at the headquarters of the command in Accra, the state capital today, the Amotekun commander Akogun Adeleye said the suspects were arrested at different locations across the 18 local government areas of the state. According to him, the suspects allegedly committed crimes such as kidnapping, rape, robbery, stealing, amongst others. Adeleye said the alleged killer of the APC chieftain had confessed to killing of the politician. Given the breakdown of the number of suspects, the Amotekun commander said for those breaking laws and order, they arrested 20 suspects pending enforcement. No suspect arrested in the last 2 weeks. Land and chieftaincy matter, no suspect arrested. In the labor union, no suspect was also arrested. Adetunji gave the identities of the kidnapped suspects to include a 35-year-old Ali, a 30-year-old Habib, a 45-year-old Bobade, a 25-year-old Shadrach, a 25-year-old Adamu, a 20-year-old Adelawa, a 40-year-old Suleiman, and a 20-year-old Mohammed, an 18-year-old Suleiman Isiaka, and an 18-year-old Husseini. They are all being investigated as suspected kidnappers. Now, moving on in this very important political scene. Kenneth Okungwa, a lawyer and also an actor who has disclosed that in a coalition they are implementing strategies to oust the incumbent president from power. Speaking via Monitor television program last night, Kenneth Okungwa said some notable people are working behind the scenes to actualize the coalition. According to Okungwa, the ruling All Progressives Congress led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu would not know what hit them in 2027. He, however, stated that at the particular level the coalition process is at, there are different layers of leadership and committees. Okungwa added that while an opposition must not be proud, it must possess the confidence needed to head to the polls and defeat the incumbent. He warned that despite having these attributes, the opposition must be aware of a certain level of propaganda by the ruling party. You're currently listening to the World News right here in Voice of the People, 90.3 FM. We'll take a very short break. When we return, we'll head into a news analysis segment where I'll be joined via the telephone with Barrister Fred Nzako, who is a political, national, social affairs commentator, also an international analyst as well on inter-political issues. Specifically, we'll be focusing on the Israel-Iran United States bombing just very recently and what that backlash could actually cause for the Nigerian economy. Do kindly stay with us. You're still listening to the World News right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. Before we head on with our analysis segment with Barrister Fred Nzako, there is political speculation over the future of Vice President Kashim Shettima ahead of the 2027 general elections. However, the presidency dismissed claims that President Bola Tinubu is considering replacing him with another northern politician. Multiple reports have suggested that 6 high-profile members of the APC were being touted as possible alternatives to Shettima on the 2027 ticket. But top government insiders say there is no such plan and that the bond between the president and his vice remains very solid. Those speculated to be in the running include Abdulaziz Yeri, former governor of Zamfara State, also Nuhu Ribadu, National Security Advisor, Muhammad Bago, Niger State Governor, Uba Sani, Kaduna State Governor, and Inuwa Yahaya, Gombe State Governor. Barrister Fred Nzako, good evening and thank you for joining us on the World News today.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Barrister Fred, welcome. It's another Monday, and the whole situation specifically with Israel and Iran and the latest development where the U.S. actually bombed some of the sites, some of the nuclear sites in Iran actually sparked a global outrage and conversation about economic stifling or economic strangulation. The big question is this. As it particularly stands, there is a potential that Iran, in trying to retaliate as they have promised, there is what they call the Strait of Hormuz. Hormuz. It is something that if Iran decides to shut it, what will now happen to the global corridor? Another country to consider here is Nigeria. And it's quite unfortunate, Barrister Fred Nzako. The reason why I'm starting with the word unfortunate is the fact that when things like this happen outside our geographical zone or our hemisphere, Nigeria is actually meant to profit from it. I mean, being a major oil producing nation, if at all Iran decides to actually block the Strait of Hormuz, Nigeria is meant to be a potential country that will now supply crude. In other words, there will be more demand. We will be demanded to produce more. Why should this threaten our economy, Barrister Fred Nzako?
Well, there are many reasons. What is happening in the Middle East will adversely, underline the word adversely, affect Nigerian economy. As a result of the structure in 1973, when there was Arab-Israeli war, the price of oil, the international price of crude oil, went up so high that Nigeria harvested so much from the benefit of that war. And that was the era when it was alleged that General Yakubu Gowon, the then head of state, said that Nigeria's problem was not money, but how to spend it.
Okay.
Because there was a quantum leap in oil revenue that accrued to Nigeria as a result of that war. Fast forward to 2025. Now there is a strife between Israel and Iran, which of course Iran being one of the strongest, if not the strongest power in that Middle East, aside from Israel, in the Arab League, Iran currently is the strongest country in terms of all aspects of strength of a nation. And then the war between Israel and Iran naturally will affect the supply of crude oil to the rest of the world. And you have mentioned the Strait of Hormuz that is utilized by major countries and major companies in transactions of crude on that Mediterranean axis, on that axis of the Middle East. Now, the difference between 1973 and today is that by 1973 we had our refineries working and we were able to refine what we consumed. In 2025, we are unable to refine. Rather, we rely so much on importation of refined products. So, when Nigeria benefits on one hand from the increase in price of crude, Nigeria will lose on the other hand from commensurate increase in price of petroleum products. I'm sure somebody will say, what about Dangote refinery? It is important for us to say that the percentage of Dangote refinery supply towards the percentage of consumption of and the domestic consumption of products that Dangote refinery supplies is not enough to arrest this challenge that we have. As a matter of fact, even with that, Dangote refinery products is internationally priced. And that is why immediately that affected the price of crude, the price of petroleum products like PMS immediately increased. If you go to even all the outlets,
Exactly.
Dangote,
Exactly.
That used to be 825 naira. It is now 950, 980.
In fact, it's now 1,000 in some dispensing outlets.
It has even above 1,000. So what it now means is that the prices are responding to vagaries in the international market.
Barrister, my question is, why should that kind of situation affect us so immediately, so soon?
It is affecting us because of the externalization of our economy. Nigeria's economy is massively externalized and dollarized to the extent that 70% of our consumption is imported. And even as we speak, you can say that, we sell the crude. But we had sold the crude in forward marketing arrangements. The crude we produce today is to meet up with the past supply agreement we had with off-takers of this crude petroleum. And that is why even when the current government came in and we said, we have increased the quantity of production we are now trying to meet up with our quota, that it has gone up to 1.8 million barrels per day. How many of it is currently sold and what quantity of it is going to service past undertakings? I understand from experts in the oil industry that the forward market in Nigeria is as long as 3 years, such that it will take about 3 years for us to exhaust the contracts that we have, the supply contract that we have with the consumers of crude petroleum. So what it now means is that we are still buying our products from international market, and the one that Dangote is utilizing is being supplied to him at international price. So the economics of this war will hit Nigeria very hard. And if it continues, the price of petroleum products, petrol, that is PMS, HGO, diesel, and the kerosene, and the rest of them will continue to go up. Essentially because our economy is externalized. We produce almost next to nothing, and we are relying on the international community to trade with us for even the minutest things that we consume. And when we are talking about restructuring our economy so that we'll pay more attention to production rather than consumption, it is now that the people will begin to understand what we mean. Because we are relying so much on consumption instead of production. The little that we have are all imported, and you need foreign exchange to import them. So it will also have an effect on the value of the naira as we speak. Anytime from now, if it has not started happening, the value of naira will weaken further against the dollar because of what is going on in the Middle East.
All right, Barrister Fred, it's quite disheartening with what we're currently experiencing. I must say, I thought that Nigeria would benefit somehow. It's an unfortunate scenario, but I thought that Nigeria would benefit somehow from what is currently going on in terms of getting more demand for our crude oil. Now, if Nigeria is heavily externalized, are you saying that all this while, with the APC coming with a promise to do more with local production? You remember during the administration of Muhammadu Buhari, he closed the borders. He wanted to encourage local farming. He wanted to also encourage local production. He also placed a ban on certain items from being imported because he felt these are items that we can do here, we can produce here. But it didn't work. So what is the measure to actually reduce importation and encourage domestication of our products? Because as it stands now, we don't know how this would escalate. Nigerians are literally grappling to stay afloat. Do you think they can cope with the economic impact of this surge between Israel, Iran, and the United States?
There is what we call import substitution policy of government, in which case you substitute importation with domestic production.
Okay.
That means you encourage the local industries by so many means. Access to finance and capital, access to land at affordable rates because every production happens on the soil, access to other facilities and the utilities, and then reduction in taxation so that you encourage them by reducing taxation and in some cases even giving them complete waiver on taxation, which is called tax incentive, and providing them with all other facilities that will encourage domestic production. The two essential things that encourage domestic production are energy, that is electricity, and the second one is finance. If the interest rates of capital and finance today is between 32 and 36%, it tells you that no industry that is anchored on production that will succeed at that rate, because they are competing with others in other countries where the rate is as low as 1%, 2%, at most 3%. So at the initial, whatever you produce has priced itself off the market. And that is what will lead people to go and continue to import because it tends to be cheaper. The banking sector of Nigeria is a very greedy sector that does not help the economy. Whether the bankers understand the meaning of what they are doing or not is a different argument, because in most other countries, the banks assist the people with access to finance. But the banks in Nigeria will only assist you if you are doing short-term business like trading and importation. When you want to go into production, they will not want to support you. To some extent, they have their reasons because of the mischievous nature of the Nigerian people. where you employ people, instead of them to come and support you to build that industry, they will want to steal as much as they can to liquidate that business. So staff management is a very big problem in Nigeria. So when we say that there are graduates that are unemployable, it is essentially because of the values our society has towards productivity. The values are negative both from the side of the government, from the side of corporate institutions, and from the side of the citizens themselves. Another major thing that enhances productivity is electricity. You cannot run productivity of a country anchored on generators. Today we are talking about solar system. Yet again, the solar system that will power production will be damn too expensive. You can use that for your home to power little things, but not to power electric motors that require huge consumption of energy to propel. These are the major instances of problems that we have. You now top it up with the insecurity in the land, whereby even if you want to delve into agricultural value chain, you will not be able to do that. You are in your factory, you cannot even walk late into the night because of fear of attack by one set of marauders or the other. So when you now aggregate all these problems, you can now see the reason why anything that happens outside Nigeria will directly and indirectly affect us. Some countries that have anchored the economy on productivity and are also oil-rich countries are now smiling to the bank, making huge money, and then taking good care of their citizens. But in Nigeria, the thing that is supposed to be of benefit to us has turned out to be a curse, has turned out to be a challenge and a problem. And that is why when Israel does bomb in Iran and Iran does bomb in Israel, the heat of that bombing would be next year in Nigeria. When Russia and Ukraine war started, you remember that the cost of grains, the wheat, the barley, and the rest of them, especially the wheat that is used in many productive sector, including the flour of all time, immediately the supply dwindled. The prices went up. Why? Because our source of supply was being affected by war. So anytime that there is a dislocation at the international level, unfortunately it will happen to Nigeria because of our terrible exposure to international economic realities. A country that cannot produce anything down to toothpick should not expect not to have the kind of challenges that we have today in Nigeria. So if we want to solve our problems, we have to sit down at home, look ourselves in the eye, and see which areas to tweak and rejig, and which areas that will help us to move forward. Not all this politicking that we are seeing all over the place, when people in authorities pay very little or zero attention to economics. Meanwhile, everything in a country rises and falls with the economics of the nation.
All right. Well, for example, the administration of the president say that they are monitoring what is going on between the United States of America, Israel, and Iran. In fact, you know that the United States decimated Iran's nuclear facilities with bunker buster bombs. And in as much as the Nigerian government rebuked Israel for airdropping bombs on Iran and killing its top generals, apparently they say they are assessing the U.S. aggression on Iranian soil. Now, there are some Nigerians, obviously, in Iran, as we do know, who actually have a couple of businesses that they do there. They reside there. Do you think there's a potential for us to see a lot of them coming back to the country? That's one. Two, how will this affect, if at all, Nigeria decides to write a letter to the United States warning them not to continue their onslaught on Iran? Do you think that the president will do so, like they were quick? It was easy for them to do so with Israel? Or do you think they'll be afraid, considering the fact that Nigeria is a potential country on the list of countries to be banned from, coming into the United States of America?
Nigeria's statement that they are monitoring what is going on in the Middle East, and they're also monitoring the actions of the United States. Can best be described as Yangade sleep. Trouble go wake up.
Really? Are you sure they're not talking about to know if they would ask the people to leave there?
That is how many people have interpreted it. That Nigeria should remain non-aligned. Don't forget that our international policy had been non-aligned. In fact, we are too two main fronts of our international policy as a country. One is the status of being non-aligned, and the other is to be Afrocentric, in which case the Africans will be the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. Now, that policy has not changed. We have not stopped being non-aligned. And that is why we don't align ourselves with any of the superpowers so that we'll be free, because we know that we don't have the muscle or the capacity even to talk to any of these countries. And that's why some people have even advised government that they should not show unnecessary sentiments towards either Israel or towards Iran, because we are lucky we are very far from them, but we are not very far from missiles. If we are geographically far from Middle East, we are not far from missiles. And if we make any terrible mistake and we are dragged into it by in one way or the other, ordinary economic blockade will force this country to cry, will force us into terrible problems. Today, American country, President Donald Trump is considering including Nigeria as one of the countries that will receive some sanctions. That was even before this statement. That was even before this war. They predicated that on the democracy activities in Nigeria, and the fact that Nigeria does not seem to be deep in democracy in this country, and by extension in West Africa. Don't forget that until yesterday or the day before, our president had been the chairman of head of state of ECOWAS. He just handed over to Iranian President Sabio just about 2 days ago or thereabouts. So Nigeria, being the most formidable country in West Africa and being the giant of Africa, must be very cautious in its international relationship and diplomacy towards issues that affect other sovereign nations. It does not pay us. That's why even some Nigerians who are some people that are even organizing protests in favor of Iran, I see all such as ignorance of the highest order.
I think we saw that in one of the northern states, the youth came out, they were protesting against this onslaught on Iran.
Yeah, so it's a very deep expression of ignorance. Yes, we can be ignored, but the international community will not ignore the leaders. They will be watching the utterances and the pronouncements of the leaders.
In fact, Barrister Fred, the United States mission in Nigeria has raised a security alert for its citizens, warning against non-official visits to military and government facilities in Abuja, the nation's capital. And the advisory was released just yesterday, following the rising global and domestic security concerns, which prompted the embassy to take precautionary measures for its staff and American nationals in Nigeria. Why would they issue such an alert on their staff in their embassies in Abuja? What is it? Is it because of the recent situation with insecurity?
There's a issue that because of the volatility of Nigerian political environment. Recall there was a time in this country when somebody made a pronouncement about pageant that was being organized in Greece.
Yeah.
It caused riot. It caused riot in Nigeria. It caused riot in Nigeria. In fact, it cost one media outfit a lot of harm because of the segment written in their editorials.
Yeah.
So Nigeria is very sensitive when it comes to religiosity. Unfortunately, without being good people. Because if we express the kind of our sentiment we express in religion and express it in our civic responsibilities and our relationship with one another, this country would be an Eldorado. But when it comes to religion, we'll flex muscles. When it comes to civic responsibility, it becomes a case of everyone to himself. So, and that is why they have to give that order, because they know that anything that happens internationally, Nigeria will find a way to make it a religious issue. And then before you know it, riot will start. Before you know it, they will begin to destroy properties and kill people. So they wanted to preempt the system and then give such travel advisory. And they have also given that in all countries that practice the kind of religious sentimentalism like the one Nigeria practices. So it is not, we are not alone, but it's unfortunate that we will go and bring a trouble that is brewing in another place and make it internalize external trouble as if we are directly involved. when we are involved, we cannot help ourselves because of our exposure of our economics and our economy to international issues. And that is obviously what is happening in the country. Before you know it, some of the supplies that we are getting will stop coming. Then it will intensify smuggling, and then the economy will bear the brunt of all these issues.
But why telling them to avoid military sites? That's what they're saying. Avoid military sites. Avoid military. I don't understand. Why would they have anything to do with military sites? Is there any form of hidden contracts that they have with them?
Don't forget that terrorists recently attacked their military barracks.
Okay.
Have you forgotten?
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, terrorists recently attacked military barracks. Not one, not twice. So there have been intensity of attacks of terrorists. Now, even suicide bombers have resurrected again. Over the weekend, there was a suicide bomb incident in Borno State. Apart from the ones that terrorists killed, the people that were traveling for wedding and all that. So all around the country, there are insecure situations. So they have to give that because this has now added to the problem. Those boys that are rioting, if they see any Oyibo person, they don't want to hear or know whether he's from America or from any other country. It is not only United States that are giving the travel advisory. Most countries around the world, especially in the advanced countries, have given the same travel advisory to their citizens to be very cautious of where they move around in Nigeria, because the problem that Nigeria has now internalized could affect them. Of course, it will not be good if it happens, but it is always safer to be cautious.
Barrister, do you think China would intervene in this? Do you think China or Russia would intervene? Because that's what Donald Trump said. Do you think they would intervene? Because already he actually suggested that Russia or China should actually speak with Iran on their threats to retaliate. So do you think they would intervene, or do you think Iran is already defeated?
At the international level, every country takes decisions that best will further its interest. That is the concept of self-preservation that is practiced at the international level. Every sovereign nation will not take decisions that will favor another nation if it will not favor them. They can only do that if it will favor them, and peradventure, other nations can benefit from that. What is Russia and China agreed that Iran sent some military hardware to Russia, in their fight against Ukraine. But what is Russia going to benefit by joining the war? Russia can throw the back, give them ammunition. It's all right. But Russia is not likely to join the war. China, again, will not likely to join the war. So, because they know the implications of that. As a matter of fact, they will weigh their options. What is their benefit in joining that war? Eventually none. The only thing they are getting essentially from Iran is the crude petroleum. They can get it from any other country until the problem is over. And even Iran will not even stop selling crude because they need as much money as they can get to mop up ammunition that they are using to fight the war. As we speak today, all their nuclear sites, installations, and facilities have been destroyed, the three main areas.
Exactly.
Even though they are bragging that they have enough uranium to rebuild. But it is easier to destroy anything than to build it. So whatever it will take them to rebuild will be 10 times more than what it cost them to build it in the first instance. And now don't forget, Esther, it's important to make this point, that Iran, international energy experts have said that Iran caused this problem onto themselves. Because for over 21, 22 years, they've been asking them to come to the negotiation table. So that International Atomic Energy Agency will go and see what they are doing. They are claiming that their nuclear system is for peace. They are using it for industrialization process and for development of their country. But Israel is uncomfortable with such statements. And the Israeli spies, the Mossad agents that are working in Iran, have given Israel the intelligence information that the way these people are going, Israel will be the first victim. And because Iran is noted to be a country under temperamental regime, especially with this since the Iranian Revolution of 1979 that brought in Ayatollah Khomeini, and today you now have another leader, Khamenei. Yet, the problem is pointing to the fact that if Israel allowed Iran to keep moving on that trail, on that track, then Israel will be maybe wiped out one day because of the nature of the temperamental leadership that is in Iran. And that's why they didn't want to wait. They didn't want to wait, and they had to go and bomb it.
And obviously, they must have had intelligence as well to tell them that indeed their fears were actually realistic.
They had to go and bomb it because since they didn't want to come to the negotiation table, coming to the negotiation table means experts from IE, International Atomic Energy Agency, will go into Iran and see what they claim they are doing. But Iran has not allowed that. So now they will be forced to open their doors. That is what this bombing has caused. And if they refuse to come to the negotiation table so that the whole world will see what they are doing, there will be more bombings and there will be peace for Iran, as long as issues of atomic energy is concerned.
Barrister Fred Nzako, I want to say thank you so much for taking your time to give us clarity, put things in context for us so we understand what this means and how this would actually affect Nigeria's economy. I do hope this is a clarion call for our administration, for our leadership, to see how they can begin to work on our internal opportunities for food production, for health production, whatever it is that will help us facilitate ourselves rather than having to rely on whatever it is we get from outside this country. So that when instances like this come up, then we're not in panic. There's no pandemonium. Because right now, it will seem as if when something outside the shore happens, Nigeria seems to be taken hostage because of that, when it's not supposed to be so. All right, Barrister Fred Nzako, thank you so much. Good evening.
Thank you, Esther. Everything rises and falls with leadership.
Exactly.
We have to know this and urge our leaders to do what is right. Thank you
so
for
much.
having me.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and just before we go, let's take a look once again at the top stories. You heard we started from stories outside the shores of Nigeria, where 9 persons have been killed in Kiev in an intense Russian air attack. Also, you actually heard as well that Qatar has closed its airspace as UK and US tell citizens to shelter in place. While back home in Nigeria, fan bans cash payment, malls tariff hike in Nigerian airports. Kenneth Okungwa also says that APC would not know what hit them. Tricycle Association wants President Tinubu's government ask it to fulfill promises. Amotekun arrest APC Ward Chairman's killer, 31 others. And that's a wrap on the world news at 6. My name is Esther Mwachuku. Good evening and thank you for listening. Do stay with us for the evening rush at 7 o'clock.